Claressa Shields just delivered the single most delusional interview answer in the history of modern media. And by the time this video is over, you are going to understand exactly why this moment is bigger than one woman fumbling her way through a question she should have been prepared for. This is not just about a boxer who cannot take accountability. This is about an entire cultural pattern of people rewriting reality in real time and expecting the rest of us to just nod along like we lost our minds alongside them. And before we get into any of it, I hope every single one of you is doing incredible today, because the level of crash-out energy we are about to dismantle is going to require all of us to be at our sharpest. Happy whatever day it is where you are. I hope you are thriving. But what we are about to break down is maybe one of the most jaw-dropping displays of self-delusion that I have ever witnessed in all my years covering this culture. And I have covered a lot of wild moments. So before we go any further into it, you already know what to do. Leave a like, not just a casual tap. I need every single one of you to stand with me here and send a very clear message that accountability still means something in this world. And also, while you are at it, make sure you subscribe if you have not already, because we are building something special on this channel and you are not going to want to miss what is coming next. The vibes are immaculate. The analysis is surgical. And when we get into what just happened, it is only going to get even more insane. But now, that is the end of the positivity for a little while, because what we have to talk about, well, it is something that has been building for months, and it all just came crashing down in one beautiful, catastrophic interview moment that has the entire internet talking. And it all centers around one woman who has somehow convinced herself that the rules of reality do not apply to her. Claressa Shields, the self-proclaimed GWOAT, the two-time Olympic gold medalist, the undisputed champion inside the boxing ring. But outside the ring, she is currently engaged in what might be the most spectacular campaign of self-deception that the public eye has ever witnessed. And I say that with full awareness of every wild celebrity moment that has ever trended. What just happened in this interview is not just a bad look. It is a masterclass in how not to handle a question that every single person watching already knew was coming. Let me set the stage for you, because the context here is critical. For the better part of a year, she has been in a relationship with Papoose. Yes, that Papoose. The rapper who was married to Remy Ma for nearly 2 decades. The man who waited for Remy while she served 6 years in prison. The man who renewed his vows with her on national television. The man who had Remy Ma tattooed on his body as a permanent declaration of his commitment. That is the man she is currently calling her partner, her future, her everything. And the entire time, the public has been asking one very simple, very reasonable question. Papoose is still legally married. The divorce has not been finalized. So what exactly is the arrangement here? And for months, she has been dancing around this question with the footwork of a prize fighter who knows the judges are watching. She has pivoted. She has deflected. She has redirected. She has thrown counterpunches at anyone who dared to ask. But in this latest interview, she finally got asked the question directly, to her face with cameras rolling, and what she did with it is something that you need to hear to believe. The interviewer, doing what interviewers are supposed to do, asked her a question that every person with a functioning brain has been wondering. How much longer are you willing to be in a relationship with someone else's husband? That is the question. Straightforward. No tricks. No hidden agenda. Just a factual inquiry based on the reality that Papoose is, at this very moment, a married man in the eyes of the law. And what did Claressa do? She did not answer. She did not take a breath and give a thoughtful, mature response. She did not say, you know what, that is a fair question and here is where I am at with it. No. What Claressa did was say one word that has now become the most mocked word on the entire internet. Pause. She said pause. As if the interviewer had just said something factually incorrect. As if the question itself was based on a falsehood that needed to be stopped mid-sentence before it could take root. Pause. Like a referee stepping in between fighters. Like a teacher correcting a student who said 2 + 2 = 5. Claressa heard the word someone's husband and her instinct was to halt the entire conversation, because in her world, in her version of reality, Papoose is not someone's husband. Now, let us sit with that for a moment, because the implications of that one word are staggering. Claressa did not just disagree with the characterization. She acted as though it was so fundamentally wrong that it did not even deserve to be completed. She treated a factual statement as if it were a lie. And this is where the psychology gets fascinating, because what we are watching is not confidence. What we are watching is not a woman who is secure in her relationship standing her ground against unfair criticism. What we are watching is a defense mechanism so powerful that it has completely overridden Claressa's ability to process basic reality. She has constructed an alternate universe in which the legal system, the institution of marriage, and the entire concept of what it means to be someone's husband have all been redefined to accommodate her comfort. And she expects every single one of us to live in that universe with her. So after she said pause, Claressa then delivered her defense. And I need you to really absorb what she said, because the logic here is something that should be studied in universities. She said that Papoose is not someone's husband because he filed for divorce. Let that sink in. In Claressa's mind, the act of filing for divorce is functionally equivalent to being divorced. The paperwork has been submitted, therefore the marriage is over, therefore he is not a husband, therefore she is not involved with a married man, therefore everyone asking about it is wrong and she is right. This is the logic. This is the actual, real, not paraphrased logic that she presented on camera as her defense. And it is wrong at a level that is almost difficult to quantify, because it is wrong not just legally, not just factually, but fundamentally at the level of how reality itself operates. Let me explain something that should not need explaining but apparently does. Filing for divorce is not the same as being divorced. Filing for divorce is the beginning of a process. It is the opening move. It is the first step on a journey that has a definitive endpoint, and that endpoint is when a judge signs a final decree and the marriage is legally dissolved. Until that moment, until that signature hits that paper, you are married. You are a husband. You are a wife. The filing does not change your status. The filing initiates the process that will eventually change your status. And this is not opinion. This is not interpretation. This is how the legal system works in every single jurisdiction in the United States of America, including in the state of Michigan, which is where she is from. Flint, Michigan. A place where, as far as I am aware, the laws regarding marriage and divorce are the same as they are everywhere else in the country. But Claressa does not seem to understand this. Or perhaps more accurately, she understands it perfectly well but has chosen to pretend she does not, because the alternative, the truth, is too uncomfortable to sit with. Because if she admits that Papoose is still married, then she has to admit that she is in a relationship with a married man. And if she admits that she is in a relationship with a married man, then she has to sit with what that means. And Claressa does not want to sit with what that means. So instead, she has constructed this elaborate fiction where filing equals finalizing, where the beginning of a process is the same as its conclusion, and where anyone who points out the difference is apparently the one who is confused. The analogy I am about to give you is the exact logical structure Claressa is using, and when you hear it, you will understand immediately how absurd her position is. Imagine a person who is unemployed. They have no job. They have no income. They fill out a job application and submit it. Then they walk around telling everyone that they are not unemployed because they filed an application. Did they get the job? No. Did they have an interview? No. Did they receive an offer? No. But they filled out the application, so in their mind, the unemployment is over. They are employed now. The application was submitted. That is the end of it. That is the logic. That is the exact, precise, identical logic Claressa is using when she says Papoose is not someone's husband because he filed for divorce. The application was submitted. The process was initiated. Therefore, the outcome has been achieved. It is logic that would get you laughed out of every room you entered, and yet she presented it on national media as though it were an unassailable argument. And here is where it gets even more revealing, because after delivering this defense, Claressa did not stop there. She went on the offensive. She told the interviewer that if they were going to call Papoose her husband, meaning Remy Ma's husband, then they also needed to call Remy Ma his wife and hold her accountable for what she is doing in her life. Now, pause yourself for a moment and think about what is happening here. Claressa, who is in a relationship with a married man, is trying to redirect the conversation toward the behavior of the wife. She is trying to create equivalence where none exists. She is trying to say that if you scrutinize me, you must also scrutinize her, as though the two situations are the same. They are not the same. Remy Ma is not running around with someone else's spouse. Remy Ma is not the one who entered into a relationship with a person who already had a marital commitment. Remy Ma is the one who was in the marriage. Remy Ma is the one who was cheated on, or at minimum, whose husband began a public relationship with another woman while still legally bound to her. The situations are not equivalent. They are not even in the same category. But in her desperation to avoid accountability, she tried to make them equivalent because if she can drag Remy Ma into the conversation, then maybe the spotlight shifts away from her own choices. And this is a pattern with Claressa. This is not a one-time deflection. This is a recurring strategy she has deployed every single time the conversation about her relationship with Papoose gets uncomfortable. When people point out that Papoose is married, she talks about what Remy Ma is doing. When people ask about the timeline, she talks about how Papoose was truthful with her from the beginning. When people question the baby planning, she talks about God handling her enemies. Every single time, the pattern is the same. Redirect, deflect, reframe, and then present herself as the one who is being unfairly targeted. It is a narcissistic playbook executed with the precision of someone who has been practicing it for a very long time. And the interview where she said pause was just the most visible example of this pattern playing out in real time. Now, let us talk about the evidence, because the evidence against Claressa Shields' position is not just legal. It is physical. It is visible. It is documented. Papoose has a tattoo of Remy Ma on his body. Not a small, hidden, could be mistaken for something else tattoo. A tattoo of his wife. The woman he married. The woman he is still married to. That tattoo is on his person right now as we speak, as she walks around calling him her partner and her future. The man she is with has another woman's image permanently inked into his skin. And when this was pointed out, what was the response? Well, at one point, there was an attempt to claim that what people thought was a Remy Ma tattoo was actually a Remy Martin bottle. A liquor bottle. As if a rapper who was married to a woman named Remy would get a bottle of cognac tattooed on his arm instead of, or in addition to, his wife's likeness. The sheer audacity of that explanation is breathtaking. And then, to make matters even more absurd, there were photos that circulated where Papoose's arm was cropped or positioned in a way that obscured the tattoo, as though hiding it would make it cease to exist. The man literally adjusted his posture in photos to conceal the evidence that he is still emotionally and physically marked by his marriage. And rather than reconsidering, she instead chose to believe the tattoo either does not exist or is something else entirely. This is the level of denial we are operating at. And then there is the Instagram situation. Papoose has reportedly kept photographs of Remy Ma on his Instagram. When this was brought up, the explanation that Claressa Shields apparently accepted was that he needed to keep them there for court purposes. For court, as though the family court system requires you to maintain a specific Instagram aesthetic as part of your divorce proceedings. As though a judge is going to look at your social media feed and say, well, I see you still have photos of your wife up, so clearly you are not serious about this divorce. That is not how any of this works. That is not how the legal system functions. That is not how social media works in relation to legal proceedings. And yet Claressa, a grown woman, a world-class athlete, someone who has been in the public eye for years, apparently accepted this explanation without question. She believed it. Or at least, she claimed to believe it, which might be even worse because it means she is either genuinely naive to a degree that is concerning for someone of her stature, or she is knowingly participating in a fiction because the alternative is too painful to face. But here is perhaps the most damning piece of the puzzle, and it is one that has been hovering over this entire situation since the beginning. Before she got together with Papoose, Claressa reportedly direct messaged Remy Ma. She reportedly tried to establish a connection, a friendly rapport, with the very woman whose husband she would eventually be in a relationship with. Now, if this is true and the evidence suggests it is, then the picture becomes much darker. Because it means Claressa was not simply someone who stumbled into a situation without knowing the full context. It means she was in proximity to Remy Ma. She had direct access to her. She could see who this woman was, what her marriage looked like, what the stakes were. And despite that proximity, despite that access, despite having a window into the life of the woman whose marriage she was about to insert herself into, Claressa proceeded anyway. And then when confronted about it, she reportedly denied it. just flatly denied it. Because that is what she does. When the truth is inconvenient, Claressa does not engage with it. She does not wrestle with it. She simply denies that it exists and moves on. And this brings us to the baby conversation, because if the interview moment was not enough, if the tattoo situation was not enough, if the Instagram excuse was not enough, then the baby planning is the cherry on top of this entire surreal Sunday. On a podcast appearance, Claressa announced that she and Papoose were planning to have a baby in 2026. They had it planned out. She was going to get pregnant, have the child, take some time, and then return to boxing. A beautiful plan. A lovely vision for the future. Except for one small detail. Papoose is still married. He is still legally bound to Remy Ma. The divorce has not been finalized. And Claressa is out here planning a family with a man who, in the eyes of the law, is still someone else's husband. She is planning to bring a child into the world with a man whose marital status is unresolved. She does not seem to understand why people might have a problem with that. Now, let me be clear about something. This is not about morality police. This is not about standing in judgment of who people choose to love or how they choose to structure their relationships. This is about accountability. This is about the willingness to stand in the truth of your own situation without twisting reality to make it more palatable. If Claressa had sat in that interview and said, yes, he is still legally married, and I understand why people have questions, and here is where I am at with it, that would have been a completely different conversation. That would have been an adult conversation. That would have been a conversation where she stood on her own 2 feet and faced the reality of her choices head on. But that is not what she did. What Claressa did was say pause. Redefine the English language, construct a fictional legal framework where filing equals finalizing, attack the interviewer, deflect onto Remy Ma, and present herself as the victim. That is not accountability. That is its opposite. That is what accountability looks like when it has been dragged into an alley and beaten senseless. And the reason this matters, the reason why this is not just celebrity gossip and why it deserves the level of attention I am giving it right now, is because Claressa Shields is modeling a behavior that has become endemic in our culture. The behavior of refusing to accept inconvenient truths. The behavior of rewriting reality in real time to avoid discomfort. The behavior of attacking anyone who presents facts that contradict the narrative you have chosen. This is not just about her and Papoose and Remy Ma. This is about a broader cultural sickness where people have decided that truth is whatever they say it is and anyone who disagrees is the enemy. And when someone with a platform, with influence, with the kind of visibility that Claressa Shields has, models that behavior on national media without pushback, it normalizes it. It tells every young person watching that this is an acceptable way to move through the world. That you can do whatever you want, say whatever you want, and when someone calls you on it, you just say pause and rewrite the rules. Now, let us talk about Papoose for a moment, because he is not without responsibility in this situation either. Papoose is the one who is still married. Papoose is the one who entered into a public relationship before closing out his marriage. Papoose is the one who has his wife tattooed on his body while parading around with another woman. Papoose is the one who reportedly told her that he keeps his wife's photos on Instagram for court purposes, which is either a lie he told her to avoid conflict or a delusion they are both participating in together. And Papoose is the one who has allowed this situation to drag on for months without finalizing the divorce, creating a limbo state where everyone involved is stuck in an unresolved narrative that keeps generating headlines and controversy. The man filed for divorce. That is a step. But filing is not finishing. And the gap between filing and finalizing is where all of this chaos lives. That gap is where she gets to pretend he is not married. That gap is where the public gets to debate the morality of the situation. That gap is where Remy Ma has to watch her estranged husband plan a family with another woman while still being legally connected to her. And Papoose has the power to close that gap. He has had that power for months. And he has not done it. And while we are on the subject of Remy Ma, let us address the deflection she attempted, because it needs to be dismantled completely. When she says that people should also hold Remy Ma accountable, she is engaging in a classic logical fallacy known as quoque, or the appeal to hypocrisy. The structure of the argument is this: you are criticizing me for X, but this other person has also done things, so why are you not criticizing them? The fallacy is that the behavior of another person does not negate or excuse your own behavior. Even if Remy Ma has done things worth criticizing, and she may well have, that does not change the fact that she is in a relationship with a married man. The two things can both be true simultaneously. Remy Ma can have her own issues to deal with, and Claressa Shields can still be accountable for her own choices. One does not cancel out the other. But she does not want you to think about that, because if you start examining both situations simultaneously, you will quickly realize that only one of them involves being in a relationship with someone else's spouse. And that is the one she happens to be in. Furthermore, let us consider the timeline that has been established. She has said that she and Papoose have been together for about 6 months. But the divorce filing came after the relationship became public. Which means that when she got together with him, he had not yet filed for divorce. He was married. Fully married. No paperwork had been submitted. No process had been initiated. He was a married man living with his wife, and she entered into a relationship with him during that time. So when she says that he filed for divorce to show how serious he is about her, the timeline suggests otherwise. The filing appears to have happened after the relationship was exposed, after Remy Ma leaked the text messages, after the public spectacle began. Which means the filing was not a proactive gesture of commitment. It was a reactive measure taken after the situation became public. And that changes the narrative entirely, because she has been presenting this filing as evidence of Papoose's dedication to her, as proof that he chose her and took legal action to back it up. But if the filing came after the exposure, then it was not a choice. It was damage control. It was a man who got caught and then took the necessary steps to try to legitimize a situation that had already been illegitimate from the start. And this is where the delusion reaches its peak, because she has taken this sequence of events and rewritten it into a love story. She has taken a situation that began as an affair, that became public through exposure, that resulted in a divorce filing as a response to that exposure, and she has reframed it as a romantic narrative where her partner proactively chose her and took legal steps to demonstrate his commitment. That is not what happened. The evidence does not support that interpretation. The timeline does not support that interpretation. Basic logic does not support that interpretation. And Claressa has committed to this interpretation with the same intensity she brings to the boxing ring. And she is not willing to let it go regardless of what the facts say. And this is what makes the pause moment so significant. It is the reflex of someone who has been living in a self-constructed narrative for so long that any intrusion of reality feels like an attack that must be intercepted immediately. The interviewer did not say anything controversial. The interviewer stated a fact. Papoose is someone's husband. That is a fact. It is verifiable. It is documented. It is legally established. And Claressa's first instinct was to stop that fact from being spoken in her presence, because in her world, facts that contradict her narrative are not facts. They are attacks. They are lies. They are things that must be paused. Now, I want to address something Claressa has brought up repeatedly in her defense, and that is her faith. She has spoken about God, about being blessed, about being favored, about watching God handle her enemies. She has presented herself as someone whose relationship is ordained and protected by divine authority. And I want to be careful here, because faith is personal, and I am not in the business of questioning anyone's relationship with their Creator. But I will say this. Faith and accountability are not mutually exclusive. In fact, in most faith traditions, they are deeply intertwined. The concept of repentance, of confession, of acknowledging wrongdoing and seeking to make it right, is central to virtually every major religious and spiritual framework. So when someone uses faith as a shield against accountability, when someone invokes God's protection while simultaneously refusing to acknowledge basic truths about their situation, there is a tension there that cannot be ignored. You cannot stand on business with God while simultaneously refusing to stand on business with reality. You cannot claim divine favor while dodging legitimate questions about your choices. That is not how integrity works. That is not how faith works. And presenting it that way does a disservice to everyone who watches and takes your example as a template for their own lives. And here is the thing that really gets me. Claressa is an extraordinary athlete. A 2-time Olympic gold medalist. She has accomplished things in her sport that no one else has accomplished. She has fought her way out of circumstances that would have broken most people. Flint, Michigan, a city that has been through crisis after crisis. She came out of that environment and conquered the world. That is a story worth celebrating. That is a legacy worth protecting. And yet, here she is risking all of it, not because of something she did in the ring, but because of her refusal to simply acknowledge reality outside it. All she had to do was say, yes, he is still legally married, and I understand the questions, and we are working through it. That is it. That is all she had to say. One sentence. One moment of honesty. And instead of that one sentence, Claressa gave us pause, a rewritten definition of marriage, an attack on the interviewer, a deflection toward Remy Ma, and a lecture about how everyone else is wrong. She took a situation that could have been handled with grace and turned it into a spectacle that will follow her for years. And let us talk about the broader cultural implications, because this is where the conversation needs to go beyond Claressa Shields as an individual and address what this moment represents. We are living in a time where the concept of truth itself is under siege. Not just in politics, not just in media, but in our everyday interactions, in our relationships, in how we present ourselves to the world. The idea that you can simply declare something to be true and make it so, regardless of what the evidence says, has become normalized to a degree that should alarm every single person paying attention. And when public figures model this behavior, when they demonstrate that you can defy factual reality on a public stage and face no consequences for it, it sends a message. It sends a message that truth is optional. It sends a message that accountability is optional. It sends a message that the only thing that matters is the narrative you construct and your willingness to defend it regardless of what anyone says. And that message is poison. It is poison to our culture, it is poison to our young people, and it is poison to the very concept of shared reality that allows a society to function. Now, I want to be fair here because fairness is important even when you are criticizing someone severely. She is not the first person to be in a relationship with someone who is technically still married. This happens all the time. People separate, they begin new relationships before the divorce is finalized, and life goes on. The issue is not the relationship itself. The issue is the refusal to be honest about what the relationship is. The issue is not that Claressa is with Papoose. The issue is that she is with him and then goes on television and acts as though the marriage does not exist, as though the legal reality is something she can simply override, as though anyone who points out the facts is the one who is confused. That is the issue. And it reveals something about how Claressa processes challenges to her self-image. When confronted with information that makes her uncomfortable, her response is not to engage with it, not to learn from it, not to grow from it. Her response is to deny it, attack the messenger, and reframe the conversation so that she remains the protagonist of a story where she is always right and everyone else is always wrong. And this is where I want to bring it back to the interview moment one more time, because there is a detail in that exchange that I think reveals more than anything else she said. After she said pause, after she delivered her defense about the filing, after she tried to redirect toward Remy Ma, the interviewer did not push back. The interviewer did not follow up with the obvious question, which would have been, is the divorce finalized? That is the question that needed to be asked. That is the question that would have collapsed the entire defense. Because if Claressa had to answer that question honestly, she would have had to say no, the divorce is not finalized. And if she said that, then her entire argument falls apart. Because if the divorce is not finalized, then he is still married. And if he is still married, then he is still someone's husband. And if he is still someone's husband, then the interviewer's original question was completely accurate and the pause was completely unjustified. The entire house of cards collapses with that one follow-up question. And the fact that it was not asked is itself a commentary on how these interviews are conducted and how people in the public eye are often allowed to construct their own reality without being challenged on it. But the internet did challenge her. The internet did what the interviewer did not do. The internet took that clip, dissected it, analyzed it, and rendered a verdict. And the verdict was unanimous. Claressa is in a relationship with a married man, and her defense of that reality is logically indefensible. The memes, the commentary, the analysis, the reaction videos, all of it converged on the same conclusion. You cannot file for divorce and then claim you are no longer married. That is not how anything works. And the more Claressa tries to defend this position, the more she damages her own credibility and public image. Because every time she opens her mouth about this topic, she gives people more evidence of her detachment from reality. It is a self-perpetuating cycle. She defends, people react, she feels attacked, she defends harder, people react harder, and the spiral continues downward. And I think the reason this has resonated with so many people, the reason why this particular clip went viral in the way that it did, is because everyone has encountered someone like this in their own lives. Everyone knows someone who refuses to accept responsibility, who twists words and definitions to suit their needs, who attacks you for stating facts that they find inconvenient. Everyone has been in a conversation where they said something undeniably true and watched the other person act as though they had just said something outrageous. That is what the pause moment tapped into. It was not just about her. It was about the universal experience of dealing with someone who has decided that reality is theirs to define and yours to accept. And the collective response to that clip was the public saying, "No, we are not accepting your version of reality. We are going to hold you to the same standards that everyone else is held to. And if you cannot meet those standards, that is your problem, not ours." So where does this go from here? That is the question that remains open. Papoose still has not finalized his divorce. Claressa is still out here defending a position that is indefensible. Remy Ma is still watching from the sidelines as her estranged husband plans a family with another woman. The situation is unresolved, and the longer it stays unresolved, the more material it generates, the more headlines it creates, and the more damage it does to everyone involved. And the tragic part is that it does not have to be this way. The divorce could be finalized. She could choose to be honest about the situation. Papoose could take the steps necessary to close this chapter. But none of that is happening because all three parties are locked into a dynamic where none of them wants to be the one who blinks first. And so the limbo continues, and the public continues to watch, and the commentary continues to flow, and the cycle spins on. And I think that is what makes this such a compelling story, not just as celebrity gossip but as a cultural moment. It is a story about what happens when people refuse to face reality. It is a story about the lengths to which someone will go to avoid sitting with an uncomfortable truth. It is a story about how the internet has become the accountability mechanism that traditional media often fails to be. And it is a story about the power of one word, pause, to encapsulate an entire psychology of denial. Claressa said that word thinking it would shut down the conversation. Instead, it opened up the largest conversation about her that has ever taken place. And in that conversation, she is not winning. In that conversation, the facts are winning. Reality is winning. And no amount of pausing is going to stop it. So let me ask you this. What do you think about everything that just happened? The pause moment, the defense, the filing logic, the tattoo situation, the baby planning, all of it. Drop your thoughts in the comments because I genuinely want to know where you stand on this. Are we being too hard on Claressa? Or is this exactly the level of scrutiny that this situation deserves? Is the filing for divorce argument something you can see any logic in? Or is it exactly what it appears to be, a desperate attempt to rewrite reality? And if you were in that interviewer's chair, what would you have asked next? These are the conversations that matter, and these are the conversations that this channel is here to facilitate. We do not just report the news. We dissect it. We analyze it. We hold it up to the light and examine every angle until the truth becomes unavoidable. And if you made it to this point in the video, you are amazing. Truly. The fact that you sat through this entire breakdown tells me that you care about the deeper layers of what is happening in this culture. And that is exactly the kind of audience I want to build here. Leave a like if you have not already. Subscribe if you have not already. And if you want to see more of this kind of analysis, more of this kind of deep dive commentary on the stories that are shaping our culture, then you know where to find it. Check out the suggested videos on your screen right now. Pick whichever one catches your eye. Every single one of them is built with the same level of care, the same level of depth, and the same commitment to telling you the truth even when the truth is uncomfortable. Because at the end of the day, that is what this is all about. The truth. Not the version of it that makes us comfortable. Not the version of it that fits our narrative. The actual, unfiltered, pause-resistant truth. And that truth is simple. Filing for divorce is not being divorced. Saying pause does not change facts. And no matter how loudly you declare your version of reality, the real one is always waiting for you on the other side of that pause. We will see you in the next one.